So, welcome everybody. Philip Wade here in the Universal Studio, North Yorkshire, England, whether it's morning, afternoon or evening for you. Many blessings. And if you celebrate Easter, then a very, very blessed Easter to you. I just felt an impromptu call to do this live today and talk about the real understanding and true message from a spiritual self-realization perspective of Easter. Actually, I'd been brought up in the Catholic faith, which I left behind many years ago now, but there were lots of messages that were conveyed to us back then about this time and about it being the most significant and important time in the Catholic calendar, and the clarity on why that is really only emerged for me many years later, and very much so in the realization of that which we truly are. So that was one of the triggers, but also I saw quite a nice little cartoon the other day about Easter, which actually had an important message, and I wanted to share it because it had both humor and a pointing to truth, which I'll expand upon in it. And the actual cartoon, it actually relates to a famous, now very, very famous thought experiment in physics. And don't get too worried about that. I'm not going to go deep into physics here, although it was an interest of mine in my earlier time. And it's actually called Schrodinger's cat, or Schrodinger's cat. And it was a thought experiment that this Austrian-Irish physicist called Erwin Schrodinger created in conjunction with Einstein in relation to some problems with certain interpretations of quantum mechanics. And in essence, I'm going to tell you this briefly now, and then we'll get into the, because it sets up the tone for the insight, or the context, should I say, for the insight. And in essence, the thought experiment went along with an idea that there was a cat in a box that had a radioactive substance that was linked to a Geiger counter, and as soon as the part of the radioactive substance decayed, the Geiger counter would detect it, and it would release some poison and kill the cat. It's only a thought experiment. It's not actually a real life experiment. And the point of it, from a quantum physics perspective, was to say that one could, because you didn't know what was going on inside the box, it was impossible to say from a quantum physics perspective whether the cat was alive or dead. And this created all sorts of discussion in the physics world at the time, and still does, by the way. Interestingly, a few years ago, completely unasked for and unexpected, an insight came to me in connection with this particular thought experiment and in the context of spiritual self-realization. And I'm going to share that with you in a moment, but I want to show you the cartoon first. So I'm going to go to that now. So you can't see, just let me get rid of the banner at the bottom there. There we go. So there's the cartoon based on the Schrodinger thought experiment. And if you can't read it, it's called, at the bottom, the footnote is Saint Schrodinger, the Forgotten Disciple. And the headline there, as long as the tomb is closed, Jesus is both alive and dead. And it's a direct reference to the Schrodinger thought experiment and the cat and the impossibility of saying whether the cat was alive or dead. Now, the insight that came to me probably 2-3 years ago now that fits perfectly with the whole message of spiritual self-realization actually takes this what's intended to be a funny little cartoon further into a deeper pointing to truth. And the insight is this: it's not that the cat, or in this case, Jesus, is alive or dead. It's actually that there is only life. Let me say that again. It's not that the cat in the thought experiment, or in this cartoon, Jesus, is alive or dead. It is that there is only life. Only life. And therein is very important understanding in the context of spiritual self-realization. Because you see, we believe ourselves until the realization to be this body-mind. And it is that single flawed and mistaken belief that creates, and the identification with it, that creates all the suffering in the world, but also all of the fear. And humanity's greatest fear is fear of death. And it's that fear that gets dissolved in self-realization, and the belief also that we are the body-mind. They come hand in hand. And the fundamental message of whether you want to say Jesus, if you happen to be brought up in with a Christian background or a Christian part of the world, or the Buddha, or any number of realized beings across the millennia, is this, that there is only life, and that this body is something that we have, but it is not that which we are. Like you have a car, you have a body. And it's a vehicle through which life, the universe, infinite silence, infinite consciousness, infinite awareness, whatever label you want to give it, expresses and experiences itself. And yes, our physical forms do die. Yet, as has been seen by many people who have realized the self, but also people who have had near-death experiences, and people who have been declared physically dead in operating rooms for 30 minutes, 25, 30 minutes. And a lady I saw recently underwater for about that time, completely and utterly, supposedly dead, coming back to life. And all of them reporting that there is a continuation of life beyond that we identify with as the body vehicle. And in the realization of the self, that will be unequivocally seen and realized. So one of the key messages in the Catholic faith and the Christian church is about the overcoming of death, but really the true message is that we are in fact life. We are in fact life, and that life is eternal. And it's not, as can be conveyed if you get lost in some of that stuff, and I've been there in my youth when I was brought up in that, and some of the confusing messages that are given around that. It's not that we need saving. It's not actually the whole pointing, the whole message of the Buddha, Jesus, and any number of realized beings is that we are life, and that realization is here to flower within us. And that there's never been a time, and there never will be a time, when one is not life and infinite consciousness or infinite silence. Yet it can be forgotten, and it can go out of your experience, and as a result, you will suffer through the identification, the belief in, and attachment to that all you are is this body. mind. So the fundamental block to spiritual self-realization and the fundamental message of Easter is that we are in fact life eternal. And it's not about saving us, it's about realizing that which we truly are as that life, as that infinite consciousness. And that realization, by the way, isn't a personal thing. It's that we collectively, everything collectively is that, and all of its expressions all at once. So it's not about life and death, it turns out, in the end. It's about there is only life. Only life. One insight that came to me as the realization flowered 7 years ago now, and mind wanted to know what was going on, was these 3 words. Life is death. Life is death. And it wasn't that the body had died, it was that the belief in that all I was this body-mind had died. And that small death, so to speak, of that thought experiment, because it is essentially a thought experiment, just like Schrodinger's, that all you are is the body-mind. With that death flowers the realization of the self as infinite silence or infinite consciousness or infinite awareness, whatever terms you want to use that, the universe, life itself. We collectively, non-personally, are that. And all of the imprints and the expressions of the universe are still there for the universe to express and experience itself. And none of them are any more or any less than all of the others. It may be some people are deeply lost in suffering, or some people acting in very dramatic ways in life, but they still are at their very core this life. They may have a different life path and cycle, and it may be a long time before the realization flowers, but it eventually is inevitable. We are all this, and we've never not been this. And it's not about believing anything I say about it, because the beauty of self-realization is that it doesn't require belief. It's beyond belief. It's before belief. It's beyond even the concept of belief. It simply is the realization of the universe, of awareness, by awareness, as awareness. And that's why you are here now, in this life, in this form, to realize this. And again, it's not about believing what I say about it. If you are open to following the path of your heart to its natural flowering, then this realization will emerge and is here for you and can bring an end to suffering. Because as the identification with that as the body-mind drops, and the emotional body also has to be dissolved with it, then the suffering will come to an end. And if we seek peace in the world, the greatest service to humanity is actually to realize our true nature. For in that realization, if you like, you could say the universe celebrates. It has a knock-on effect, an invitational effect on the rest of humanity. So the greatest service and the greatest purpose in life is to realize this, and that life's purpose and meaning are the realization of this rolled into one. So that's the true message of Easter. And actually, it's not so much that there was resurrection, it's just that there was and is only life. That's all. And then there's this ascension word, which also in the Christian context refers to the ascension of Jesus into heaven. But it's been, shall we say, purloined by spiritual communities around the world and taken to mean all sorts of things which are very confusing. But the true meaning of ascension is simply a monumental shift in consciousness to the realization of the self. That's all ascension is. The realization of that which you truly are. It's not about, as I've seen written and talked about in great depth, going to some other world or some beautiful place that's not on this planet Earth or whatever. No, it's simply about spiritual self-realization. Spiritual self-realization is ascension. That's all. And that's what the message of, also the message of Easter in the Christian context, but has got confused, it has to be said, by organizations built around that. But as the realization flowers, this is seen unequivocally, and it's not dependent upon another being. It can only flower in its unique way, in your form, and you are already that which you are seeking. And by that which you are seeking, I do not mean you personally are that. You, we collectively, the whole universe is that. And we are all of its expressions at once. So looking at the comment from Tracy, I can see there, she says, I like to say we are the children of the one. Actually, an insight that came to me is children of the ocean, but we are the ocean and the children at once. All of it and none of it and more. It's impossible to put it into words. It's completely inexpressible, and anything I'm sharing with you and pointing at here can only be ultimately realized. There's a phrase I came across a number of years ago, and it goes like this: words at best are an honest lie. Silence at worst is a naked verity. So any words used to describe or point at this are at best honest lies. If they're coming from the heart space, from the space of awareness, then you will be transported, if you're open enough, to beyond the words, to the place of realization, the silence, the naked verity. That's the infinite silence, or infinite consciousness, or infinite awareness, or universe. You will see that that is what you are and always have been, and that this body that you have is simply a gift from life, to express and experience itself. And it's a beautiful gift, because without this physical domain, there is no experience. There just simply is the absolute awareness that's aware of itself eternally as that. And this realization is a beauty beyond words. If you could think of the most beautiful thing you've ever experienced and multiply that by 1,000,000, you're still not even close to this realization. And yet it's here for you now. And that's why you are here in this life, in this body, to realize experientially this. And it's here for us all. It's not just for the special few, the Buddhas and Jesuses of this world. There have been many realized beings. There are some that are better known than others. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But the realization is here for us all, and it's here now. It's simply a matter of following the calling of your heart, seeing where that takes you, taking that as the highest and important priority in life, opening to that, being prepared to be humble enough to let go of the idea that there's something that you actually know about this, and let the realization flower. Everything that I'm pointing at and sharing here it obviously looks like it's coming from the mouth of Philip, but actually it isn't Philip that knows. It's only the awareness that knows itself as awareness. And yes, for sure, my form is here, but it's really a communication is going on at the physical human level here, but there's a much deeper communication going on from awareness to awareness as awareness, or consciousness speaking to consciousness about consciousness is another way of putting that. So coming back to Easter, this is the true meaning and message of Easter, to open to this possibility, to this realization. For when the one that was called Jesus said, I am the way and the light, he didn't mean him personally, although that's how it's been interpreted. It doesn't mean that. It means the infinite I am, the pure beingness of the universe, is the entry point to that realization. I call it spheres of light. In the Hindu tradition, it's called Hiranyagarbha, the golden egg of creation. It means that. And we are collectively all already that, and that was the message of the Buddha, that was the message of Jesus, Krishna, and many, many others. And more people are opening to this as life unfolds now. In fact, it's probably true to say that there's been at no point in recent history, shall we say, has there been such an unfolding as the one that's taking place right now, even though the world looks pretty chaotic right now and has been for the last 12 months or more. All of this is part of the process. All of this is putting many things in front of humanity to make some serious choices, and that's exacerbated hugely the suffering in the world, for sure. And there's a deep, deep compassion for that. And yet beyond and before all of that, there is the eternity of life itself, and we collectively are that. And that's the invitation from life to life as life. And at the deepest levels, we're choosing this experience right now so that we can open to that flowering. Because we are life eternal, and it is that which you will eventually realize. And you can do that in this lifetime if you're open to it. That calling is there. I often ask people at events, why are you here? Why have you come? And they give many answers, but really all of the answers are the same answer, is that they felt some or sensed some calling inside that they can't really put words to. And that calling is the calling to this realization. It's life calling to life, through life, as life, to say, be open and listen to this, the calling of the truth of your heart, which is the heart also of the universe. And let that realization, be open to letting that realization flower. Nothing more beautiful than this. And the beauty of who you are is here to be and awaiting to be realized and to be seen. So the true message of Easter, notwithstanding things that people have put around it, is actually about self-realization, and that not just the Buddha, not just Jesus, but actually all of us can have this flowering, can have this realization, and that there's no greater or lesser beings. Ultimately, we are collectively all this, and that life is in fact eternal, and death, yes, the physical form will die, but in the true sense of the word, death is an illusion, for it will be seen instantly. The physical body has passed, life has continued, and as I've said earlier in the stream, many people who have had near-death experiences have seen that. The evidence is overwhelming, and there's probably, in fact, I remember a story from a very famous surgeon who's now passed over, Dr. Lloyd Rudy, and he had one of the most profound experiences of that with somebody in his operating theatre, which made him think again. And he shared this at a group of surgeons meetings from people around the country. I think he was in the US. And they all reported having had similar experiences. It's just that it's not shared so publicly necessarily, but pretty much any person in an ER room will have had this experience. Life is eternal, unequivocally so, and it's not a belief, it's a realization. So that's pretty much it, really, in terms of the message I wanted to share. Let me just have a look just to see if there's any comments here to pick up on. Malcolm saying, the only calling I've ever felt, and the one that just is, and once felt you will never fall back from, as there you have found your truest form of essence of self. I'm glad to hear that, Malcolm, that you felt that, because that realization is why we're here. It's the whole purpose and meaning of life wrapped into one. So simple, this, because that which you are seeking is that which you already are, and it's not this body-mind, but it's the fact that you are life eternal. You, we collectively are that. So I'm just going to see if there's anything pops up in terms of comments or suggestions, but whilst I'm on, I will just remind anybody who feels called to this to say that on Fridays, and we did, I've been doing lots of online retreats because of the COVID-19 situation, but last Friday I began a series of 3 online spiritual inquiry sessions on Friday evenings, 8 p.m. UK time. They're on Zoom for a nominal donation where people can raise their spiritual inquiry questions, and we'll spend an hour together, very brief meditation to start, and then raise your questions. And people found that very, very powerful when we did the first one last Friday. They're kind of like a laser focused mini retreat. So the next one of those is this Friday. And I think I'll pop that. I think I've got the link here actually. I think Jolene may have already pasted it in the comments, but just in case, if anybody feels called to that, it's there. It's on my website if anybody wants to come to that. The other thing is, if anybody's interested in what a retreat is like, then also on my website, again, for a very nominal donation, you can get 10 hours of self-realization retreat from the New Year retreat. So if you just register for that, make a small donation, you will get that sent to your inbox. Somebody's asked a question here now. Here's an important question. What happens if one doesn't have self-realization before they die? Okay, so this is an important question. So the universe is a continuous process, and all of it is here now. And so this is where, from various traditions, the principle of reincarnation comes in. There's many things that happen as the physical body is left behind from one life. And people report this who've had near-death experiences. And one of the things that's reported, and you can look into this in great depth, is what's called the life review. Well, actually, the first realization is that they're not the body. There's a kind of life review process, a bit like a flicker movie that takes place. Not to challenge people, but to see the whole aspect of their life from a wholly different moment perspective. And that, if you like, then sets a tone for how they will come into another life in another form. And that process continues until the full realization. Not only the full realization has flowered, but the emotional body has dissolved, and all of the intentions behind that manifestation have come to close. Now, again, I must stress it's not about believing what I say about this. What's far more important here is to be open to that realization and use the opportunity in this life, in this form, to follow that to its natural conclusion. It's not a race, this self-realization, and it's not a test either. There's no thing you have to prove. You are already this. So it's about being open to that realization and the eternity and eternal nature of life, and the universe is choosing to express and experience itself. I sometimes use, and in fact use a lot, this metaphor for life and self-realization. You can just about see it, I hope, here. You tend to think of yourselves as this point of light. You might just be able to see them, they're blue. And that's the body-mind. And you think all the other body-minds are separate from you. But the whole calling of self-realization and the term look within, as you open to the meditative space, you move into a deep realization, and the first part of that is the state I am. The state I am. That's the true I am that I was referring to, that Jesus was referring to earlier. And that's the I am in I am the way, the truth, and the life. I call it spheres of light. It's also called Hiranyagarbha. It has many names. As you open into the look within, universal beingness is, if you like, spirit, pure spirit, the first expression of the universe. And then what powers that is what's called is the battery in this metaphor, which is the infinite silence or infinite consciousness, except it's not just at the bottom, it's everywhere. It's universal in its expanse, and that's the infinite silence. It's energy that's aware of itself as awareness. It's the source power of the universe. It's infinite silence in my language, because that's how it chose to express itself in the realization. Spheres of light, or pure being, the pure universal state I am, and form, physical form, otherwise known as the Trinity or the triality of consciousness, the 3-in-1. That you'll also find that in many traditions, not just the Christian one. So this cycle of life is eternal. And if the realization hasn't taken place in one life form, it will in another, and it's inevitable. And the beauty of it is that there's an experience of following that calling and the opening to that realization to bring the suffering to an end in this lifetime. If you choose to follow that calling, that realization can flower, will flower, but you have to be really open to that. So hopefully that answers your question. But again, must stress, it's not about believing me. It's about being open and seeing what the silence of your heart has to say about this, because it will then become unequivocally clear. Like this. There's another comment here. Okay, I'm not sure if that's a comment about the stream, Beth, or whether it's a comment about life. But I'll pop it on at the screen anyway. I was disconnected for a moment, but I don't think I want to come back. Is it a choice? I'm not sure whether you mean the stream you were disconnected or whether you meant from life. So I'm going to assume you mean disconnected from life, although it could have meant the stream. Irrespective of that, we can certainly have the experience of feeling disconnected from life. And that's because of a deep case of mistaken identity as the body-mind. And if you take that to its extremes, and many people have had this experience and there is deep compassion for that, then you will feel completely and utterly disconnected from life because you're deep in a place of mistaken identity and suffering. It appears that that's the totality of your experience. Yeah, within those moments, actually, there's a great power there. And this has happened to some people. In fact, in some of those moments, people have had deep seeing, because in those moments there can be a deep, deep surrender that takes place. And there can be a deep seeing. And that happened to Eckhart Tolle, in fact, perhaps the most famous example of that. But other people have had deep seeings as well. But in some of those cases, their emotional pain body didn't dissolve quite as fully as Tolle's, but there was certainly a seeing. Now, the cycle of life is eternal and permanent, but the realization of the self and the dissolution of the emotional pain body, you could say, brings the cycle to an end, and one fully returns to and as the silence, might be a way of putting to that. But there's an energy behind the cycle that needs to be drawn to a conclusion through the realization and the dissolution of the pain body. Life itself is eternal, and again, it's not about believing what I say. It's about realizing this for yourself in this form that you have. Life, and we are all life, has chosen to express itself uniquely in infinite variety, one of which is your form, Beth. One of which is that's how important the form of Beth is. Life has chosen, the universe itself has chosen to express itself as Beth, as Philip, as Tracy, who was commenting earlier. That's how important it considers that expression and that journey. And it seeks for that to flower in that form as well. That's how important the gift is. At a human level, it appears we have a limited amount of choice, so to speak, but we are freedom itself. We are that life. And it's simply life communicating with life, through life, as life, in all its infinite variety. And it has no judgment about any of it. Although at the human level, we obviously don't condone unloving actions. We learn at the experience of compassion and peace and love. But actually, the realization is that we are life. So, at one level, it appears as a choice. At another level, the realization is inevitable. But there's a choice, if you like, in this lifetime to follow the calling of your heart or not, as the case may be. The higher choice is to follow the calling of your heart to its natural flowering. That's the choice. That's the experience of choice that life gives itself. But irrespective of that, you're still life eternal. You're still that infinite silence. So both and more. It can't be put into words. So people talk of reincarnation, that's a whole other subject, but that is simply that energy of that cycle. If a body passes over without realization, then it will appear in the human terms in another lifetime, and that journey will continue, and you will have had many lifetimes before this and many after it, possibly, depending on where you're at in that process, in that realization. But again, it's not about believing me, it's about seeing this for yourself and opening to this, because anything I say, until it's been experientially realized, is just a pointing. That's all it is. It's just a pointing. More accurate, more useful for you is to listen to the silence of your heart. And that's why I share the infinite silence meditation, the retreats, the online, the one-to-ones and all the rest of it, is because the knowing is complete that I am that. And it is so complete is that I know it is known, not by Philip, but by life itself, that you too are that. You too are that. There's no doubt about this. The seeing is so clear. You too are that. See what the silence of your heart says about that. It already knows. It's nothing to do with believing me or anybody else, for that matter. The Buddha, Jesus, or whatever. It's about realizing you too are that. That was the message of the Christed One, the Buddha, and many, many other realized beings. Good. So I'm glad that you feel called to that, Beth. And in the following of that calling, and in the humbleness of it, and the openness to, and this is very important, I certainly experienced this in my own journey, this truth, I know nothing, as Philip, I know nothing. I might have thought that I knew certain things, but actually, for me, it was clear that I didn't actually know. And it wasn't until the realization flowered that it became unequivocally clear and expressed in this form. So the person doesn't know, but the awareness realizes itself as awareness. And yes, the form of Beth, Tracy, or so forth will still be here, but you will see that that is simply an expression of the absolute, or the infinite silence, of the infinite awareness. And that there's never been a time, and there never will be a time, that you are not that. So follow that calling, follow that, honor the calling of your heart, totally, utterly. Put it at front and center stage of life, of your life, And it doesn't mean you give up on all the practical aspects of life. There can be this balance. It's just that this becomes the central organizing principle of your life. And there may be many layers to be shed, but it's worth it. It really is, for the peace, for the tranquility, the compassion, the joy for no reason that arises from this, that we all already are the realized self, the essence, the infinite silence, infinite consciousness, the universe itself. It's that important. And the universe is seeking to realize itself in the form of Beth, and indeed everybody who happens to chance upon this live tonight, or anybody who watches it in the future. That's why you're here. For this. Doesn't get any bigger than this. Doesn't get any bigger than this. And again, the silence of your heart will know if that what's just been shared there resonates, is true for you or not. You will see and you will know as that. How beautiful and how perfect. So back to Easter. This is the true message of Easter. That which you are seeking is that which you already are and is here to be realized in your form. That's how wonderful and beautiful you guys are. Somebody once asked me when I'm doing what I call the open gaze meditation, what is it I see when I'm doing the open gaze meditation? You can experience that on my website, by the way. It's called staroflight.org. It's the sister meditation site to my main site. There's an open gaze meditation on there. It was something that came to me in meditation to share with the world. And I was asked, what is it I see? Well, I can see your physical form when I do that, obviously. If you're sat opposite me and we're doing the open gaze, or if we're on a Zoom call. But the true seeing is coming from this awareness. It's sometimes referred to as the unseen seer. And it is that looking upon itself as itself. And when people do that and commit to that open gaze meditation, it can have a truly transformative effect upon them, because they drop away from, if you're open, you start to drop away from body, form, identity, and you start to drop the labels into deeper seeings. So give that a try if you feel called. It's about 15 minutes long, I think it is. I think somebody just posted the link to it there. I think that was Jolene, so thanks for that, if you want to try that one. That's got all the main meditations on that site: the Spheres of Light meditation, the Pure State I Am, the Open Gaze, and the Infinite Silence or Alchemy of the Spirit Transmuting Fear into Love meditation. That's the one for dissolving the emotional body. So let me go back to this little slide again, which was, and I just moved the banner. And the funny little graphic there, which was pointing to the Schrodinger's cat thought experiment. And share once again, there's something deeper than is on this little cartoon here. And it's not that Jesus is alive or dead. It is simply that there is only life, and that life is in fact eternal. That's the pointing. That's the realization. And that's also why I wanted to share that with you today. That little cartoon, which I thought was both funny and a deep pointing at the same time. So that's pretty much it from me, folks. The true message of Easter is here for you. Embrace this if you feel called. And if you want to, one more time, I'll just say next Spiritual Inquiry live on Zoom next Friday, 9th of April, and the following one, 16th of April. Nominal donation, and you can come along with your questions. So do that if you feel called. I think Jolene's just put a thing up there, and have a beautiful Easter wherever you are in the world. I'll leave you with some harp music. It's by my friend Tara Cook and recorded by her husband Ken.